Yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the human dimension of the palm oil sector. I need an introduction slide because when the first three people I meet ask me what's Tenaga Nita, this is absolutely necessary. It is literally translated women's force. It is a women's organization that's been established about 20 years ago, very much focused on rights, human rights, and we've expanded not to just look at women's issues, but also other vulnerable groups like migrants as well as indigenous communities. We are involved in the RSP, although not directly as members, but we were participating in the setup of the standard and putting the social criteria in there. And our activities are very much focused on human rights, and that should not be difficult for all of us to try to comprehend because we are human beings after all. So if you do put yourself in a situation, which I'm going to later on elaborate about, and you feel that that situation is wrong, that it is wrong. Okay, it's a little bit formatting problems. Okay, an overview of the social impacts. Now we're looking at just very broad categories here. There's this process of disempowerment and continued subjugation of workers. We're talking about workers and women groups that are involved in the sector. And this is because also of limited access to information that they get. And as a result, there is that high level of dependency of the workers on the company, on the management. And this somehow what we've seen is perpetuating the state of denial that there is something inherently wrong within the industry where human rights are concerned. What is troubling, of course, there's still this emergence of slave-like practices that's going on within the industry. I know this is very depressing to start off as a slide, but it's absolutely necessary when you've only got 10 minutes. So what we're highlighting here is that where there are these practices, there is very limited or absolutely no room for redress. Just very, very quick points that shout out to you. For example, impacts on workers, especially women. We're looking at pesticides poisoning that are affecting their health and their reproductive health. To make it worse, there's also a very poor healthcare system operating within the sector. You're looking at heavy workload, overworked, poverty, and what's important here is there is this continued process of impoverishment through indecent wages that they're earning in the plantations. There's increasing violence, single motherhood, and limited job opportunities. These are very general impacts. They're not specific to a particular company. We are also looking at migrant workers, the issue of contractual labor, slave-like conditions where, for example, their passports are withheld. So they're kept almost like limited access to walkabout. Workers, there are workers that are undocumented. You're looking at still discriminatory pay and conditions, contract substitution, negative health effects, and the situation of stateless children, which leads to child labor within the plantations. We're moving on to the next group. We're talking about indigenous peoples, and these should not be new to all of us. We've heard about this, particularly in the media. Landlessness, loss of ancestral lands due to encroachment and land grabbing, and there's no recognition of rights whatsoever, no free, prior, and informed consent being practiced. Loss of livelihood, you're talking about damage of land and food gardens, increase in conflicts and violence, total disharmony within and between communities. Loss of cultural identity, and with loss of biodiversity, you get the loss of indigenous knowledge, and social-cultural system just breaks down from therein. So that's loss. As mentioned earlier on, there's migration. People will move where there's food, and that affects the fabric of society. You're looking at livelihoods, cultures, and economic circumstances being transformed. You're looking at marginalization of communities, and the groups that are most vulnerable with that respect are women and children that are most affected. In Sarawak alone, for example, in Borneo, Malaysia, you're looking at over 200 cases that are still pending in court, and these are land conflict cases with indigenous communities, and they're escalating conflicts. They're not going down. They're often very violent. There are cases of missing girls, women being raped. What is most difficult for us to tackle or get a hand in right now is because the companies seem to be so immune because they've got the state machinery that are backing them up, so they're complicit in all these abuses. And the link is so strong that you see intersectoral links between logging and oil palm as well. Now, the RSPO standard has got NCR, Native Customary Rights criteria, embedded in it. You're looking at a whole list right here. So it's an issue that's been well integrated within the RSPO. The thing is, you'd expect RSPO members to be able to get a grasp of all these issues, but you find still RSPO members that are ignoring court rulings that are already in favor of communities that have fought the legal battle for over 15, 20 years. You've got communities trying to engage with such member companies, but then still all of these direct engagement approaches have been largely ignored. And when all of these communities, through their selective representatives, have been trying to communicate this directly with them, for example, through the certification bodies, when the RSPO audits are proceeding, these are considered as not an official consultation. So there's always been something that will push and undermine community efforts to bring their issues across. Now we're looking at the gender dimensions of the RSPO, and of course the standard also has labor and very specific gender components in there. For example, one that requires a policy be put in place to prevent sexual harassment and violence and to protect women's reproductive rights. It also, in the guidance note, requires you to set up a specific committee, and it is very much important because you're dealing with an industry which is very patriarchal, and it has to come across that there are various roles that women play within the plantation sector, and it's them being mothers, wives, workers. I mean, they've got motherhood responsibilities, and furthermore, their biological makeup, they're absolutely different. They've got thinner skin, for example, they absorb chemicals a lot easily. So there are different health and safety considerations when you have to think about women as workers rather than workers and then as women. My last slide, I think this is on accountability and responsibility. As it is right now, unfortunately, I mean, I'm new to a social NGO. I came from industry, and to learn that these are the same issues that have been going on for the past 20 years, you begin to wonder. Ground realities are showing that there's still significant erosion of fundamental rights, human rights. They're destroying the very fabric of communities right now. Companies, especially companies that are within the Roundtable Sustainability Circuit, cannot be in a state of denial. They have to embrace this as an issue, and they cannot continue with business as usual because they're perpetuating the situation of gross human rights violations. Human rights will just simply have to be upheld, and you just have to be transparent about it. Set up the mechanisms that need to be there for conflict resolution and dealing with grievances effectively. Communication is key. I think the moment when you stop communicating with your stakeholders, then they will start to look at different avenues, and the best way to get your attention is to go through media. So be proactive, bring about positive changes in national policies. You are the solution. Mentioned in the earlier presentation, the government's just not doing enough, and you're there in that power position to really make a difference. For example, aligning wages, with rights. There are plenty of opportunities for the corporate sector to respond, and three of them that we've outlined here is through recognition of rights, empowering the communities so that they are able to uphold their rights, and partnering up with communities and civil societies to see where your sustainability efforts can be a lot more real on the ground.